What's up, YouTube? Today I wanted to make a video on the book of Enoch. And so what exactly is the book of Enoch? The book of Enoch kind of highlights the time of, the Muslims call him Idrīs. In the Bible, he's called Enoch. And basically the time between Enoch slash Idrīs and the flood. The book of Enoch kind of talks about what happens in between this time period. And so basically, the book of Enoch outlines a situation in which the Watchers, as they're called, or fallen angels, they're angels who descend down on earth to quite literally watch humans. And during this time, they become attracted to women and they mate with these women and they have this breed of children who become giants, and they're referred to as the Nephilim. And also during this time, these angels, they actually start teaching the people, like black magic and astrology and kind of mystical knowledge that humans really didn't know at the time, even how to make, bronze and weapons and this type of stuff. So they kind of caused corruption. And, during this time, Enoch was kind of trying to get away from all of this and lead his people. And during this time, similar to the similarity between the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, how he went into the cave and then Gabriel met him, Enoch was kind of having the same thing. He was like, there's too much negativity around me. I'm going to kind of try to, connect to God on my own. And during that time period, he's actually brought up to heaven. And while he's brought up into heaven, he's sent to tell these fallen angels, hey, you guys are going to suffer for life. You're going to be bound up under the earth. I'm letting you guys know this is what he decreed. And the angels say, oh, please, ask forgiveness and mercy on our behalf to God. And so Enoch goes to God. God says, no, it's going to happen. Following that, you have these giants running around, the Nephilim, the children between the angels and the Watchers. And so now the flood happens, and obviously biblically and Quranically, the flood is something that's described. This is in the time of Noah. And so, all these corrupt people who knew, these mystical things and this black magic and all these giants, they're then destroyed in the flood, which, is part of the reason the flood occurs. And, Enoch is essentially, at this point raised into heaven. And he's sort of acting as a scribe, or almost like not necessarily an angel, but almost taking on the role of an angel, and very high. He's in a lot of descriptions, his throne is right next to God's throne. So he's quite clearly very, very elevated, right? Very high ranking. And so how does this apply to what's in the Bible, and how does this apply to what's in the Quran? Because I see a lot of people, the book of Enoch right now is super popular. It's all on YouTube. You can watch, if you want to learn more about it, you can watch 1,000,001 videos about it. But a lot of where, the authenticity of, okay, well, how true is this? It's brought back to the Bible, where in Genesis in chapter 5, verse 24, it says, then he, Enoch, was no more because God took him. And then we see something even more in Hebrews, so that's chapter 11, verse 5. It says, by faith Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and that he was not found because God had taken him. Okay, so we're seeing God took him, God take him. This is the Bible. Now, what does the Quran say? So now you go to Surah Maryam, which is chapter 19, verse 56, and it says, and mention Idrīs, right? This is just the Arabized version of Enoch. And it says, and we raised him to a high station. So we're saying, and we raised him to a high station, we took him. Now this is what the Quran and the Bible are saying, right? So this is what we know are actual facts, that, and it's believed in Islamic, like, mainstream Islamic thought, that aside from Jesus, who we know was taken up, didn't die an earthly death, Enoch didn't die an earthly death either, Idrīs didn't die an earthly death either. So this isn't like odd, right? And so, the book of Enoch predates the Quran. And so, I'm not saying, we have to sort of think a little bit with these type of things. So I'm going to use other examples so you can sort of see where the book of Enoch fits into the grand scheme of what's truth and what's false. So when we hear the story in the Quran of Dhul Qarnoon, okay, we're hearing Alexander the Great, right? And he's building, and in this story, Dhul Qarnoon travels to the across the land in an area where the sun, sets in the east or the west, and you can learn more about that. But essentially, Dhul Qarnoon, he builds this wall, and it blocks out Gog and Magog. And so now that story actually predated the Quran, but it was called the Alexander Romance. And in this story, Alexander the Great, he goes and he builds a wall and from molten lava, and he used the help of even the jinn, and it blocked Gog and Magog. So it's not that the Quran copied off of an old story. It's just that this is something that could have actually happened, right? And the Quran is talking about it. And where else do we see another example of this? In the book of Solomon. So in the Quran, there's a verse where God says, "And we tested Solomon by putting a body on his throne." So without any context, you're like, what the heck's going on? But then when you read the book of Solomon, you understand that Solomon had a ring. In this story, Solomon had a ring, and he could control the jinn or the demons through this ring. And there was one demon, Asmodeus, who tricked him and was able to steal his ring, and he went on his throne, and then he sent Solomon way off in the desert, and Solomon kind of had to walk all the way back and overtake his throne. Now the Quran just says, "And we tested him by placing a body on his throne." So it's the same thing as when we reference the Alexander Romance. It's the same thing as when we reference the book of Solomon. It's the same thing that when we reference the book of Enoch. We're seeing within Scripture that these events are related. As far as if everything in those books are accurate, we don't know. But they could be, right? Because we can't pick and choose when we're talking about religion what's too fantastical and what's mythology, right? Because religion within itself is mythology. I'm not saying mythology is fake. I'm just saying it's crazy, right? A man hitting his staff and it turns into a snake. A man lifting up the Red Sea. These are fantastical things. So we can't pick and choose. Well, I accept crazy stuff in this book, but not things I consider crazy from the other book. Okay, so that's where we have to kind of use discernment, where it's like, we can't, you can learn from this, you can find it interesting, and you can actually get bigger context behind things that are in the Bible or things that are in the Quran that aren't fully explained. Okay, so I need to preface that when we talk about Book of Enoch. I'm going to do other videos on, the Alexander Romance and the Book of Solomon, because they're interesting. So an interesting story also, not just the Quran saying and mentioning Idrīs and we raised him to a high level, is Hārūt and Mārūt. Okay, now these are two angels who were sent to Babylon, and what they told the people is, God basically said these angels taught people how to do magic to break apart families and relationships, and there's till this day there's incantations to do those specific things. Right, I think that's one of the bigger things that people who do black magic want done. But anyways, God says in the Quran, they only say, "And we are a trials who do not disbelieve." So this is angels who came down, and they basically said, "Hey, we're going to teach you these negative things, but realize, we're a trial. So if you do this, you won't have any. You'll go to hell. Essentially, this is bad." Okay, now. There is tafsir, okay, which tafsir means broader explanation about who Hārūt and Mārūt were, which actually is, it's backed up by Ibn Kathir and Al-Tabari, and these are guys that do a lot of tafsir on a lot of the Quran, which are, further explanations. This isn't even me being controversial by saying the story, but not many people know about what really happened with Hārūt and Mārūt. So the story with Hārūt and Mārūt, when we're going to go deeper in there, and this is an Islamic belief, is that essentially there was a point when the angels were looking at the humans and they were noticing how they sinned a lot, and the angels kind of said, these humans, what's wrong with them? Like, that they just sin all the time. And God basically said to them, well, you're angels, you guys don't have humanly desires, right? You're not created the way that they're created. So, God made this plan where he was going to say, okay, since you guys doubt him so much, let's have the best of your angels. We're going to send them down to earth with humanly desires and emotions and all that. And then we're going to see how they act. So the angels that were chosen were Hārūt and Mārūt to essentially descend down onto earth, become humans, and just live amongst humans, with now these new desires that they didn't have before. And almost immediately they met a figure who's associated with Venus, or the Roman god Venus. The Arabs had a similar belief regarding the Roman god of Venus. And it's also Aphrodite's. So it's like an archetype of lust, a beautiful woman who's lustful. You see that in the different mythologies that's associated with the planet Venus. And anyways, so they come down, they see this beautiful woman, and they want to have sex with her because she's so beautiful. And so the woman, she basically says, if you want to do this, I think they meet her at a bar and they're drinking wine, and it's making them infatuated with her. And then she basically says, okay, well, if you want to have sex with me, you need to kill this man. And so they kill a man, and then she says, okay, I want you to teach me the secret name of God, because that's a big thing in mysticism. What's the hidden name of God? And if you know the hidden name of God, you get powers. And one of the belief systems to broaden this subject is that when Solomon asked who could bring the throne to me the quickest, it wasn't a jinn who actually brought him Sheba's throne to his palace when he wanted to impress Sheba. It was actually a human who knew one of the secret names of God, and through that he gained power. So, she says, okay, well, I'll let you have sex with me. You gotta, they're drunk. And they said, yeah, we want to have sex with you. She goes, yeah, I'll let you, but you have to kill a man. You have to tell me what the forbidden name of God is, or the hidden name of God, I should say, is. And so they end up doing all those things. So they commit 3 sins. Number 1, they drink. Number 2, they have adultery. Number 3, the worst of them, is that they kill someone. And then they also share, a hidden knowledge. And this is all within a short period of time. And then so this Venus archetype, it could be Aphrodite's, it could be Venus. I think the Arabs call her El Zubir, the morning star. Because she learns this name, she's elevated up into the sky, but then she forgets how to descend. So, that's part of the story. But, as punishment for Hārūt and Mārūt doing this, they're actually, tied up in Babylon and hung backwards. And now they're going to, this is their punishment. And so when God says, they only told people the black magic and the negative things, and they had to say this is a trial, this is coming from the context that it wasn't that, they were bad already and they were going to tell people bad things, but they did say that this is, you're going to go to hell for doing this. So it changes kind of the context of like these were obedient angels who came down and were purposely meant to do this. And it's now changing the context to these were angels who were actually being punished and being held backwards. And so now why do I bring up this story? Whether that story is true or not, it was actually very well believed in Islamic belief system, right? Now, whether the story is true or false regarding Hārūt and Mārūt, I'm going to reference it back to the book of Enoch, and we're seeing there that the concept of fallen angels, sort of do exist, and even the punishment the angels had were exactly the same, where they're hung, backwards in the earth, and how these angels, the watchers in the book of Enoch, they taught people bad things. So we're kind of seeing some sort of alignment with the old explanation of Hārūt and Mārūt, and so there's some interesting, there's a lot of overlap over there. Also, regarding Enoch and Idrīs, we raised him to a high station and God took him. We're seeing in the book of Enoch, it's saying that, Enoch, he was, kind of praying and meditating, and God brought him up to him, and he sort of became a celestial being. He sort of became a heavenly being. He's associated with the scribe, with mystical knowledge, astrology. And so in the Quran and Islamic belief system, it said that he's the first prophet to write. He is associated as a scribe in the book of Enoch. He writes a lot of things, whether it's people's sins or whatever is going to happen. And so, we're seeing a lot of overlap between all these things. We're seeing overlap between the Quran, the Bible, the book of Enoch, and even in a broader perspective, Islamic belief system. So we're seeing Hārūt and Mārūt being fallen angels, and even Enoch being associated with a scribe in the Quran, in Islamic, excuse me, not in the Quran, but in Islamic belief. And then in the book of Enoch, him being described as a scribe. And yeah, I think that's all I also, the final story to finish it off is also believe that when the devil was brought up to heaven, he's a jinn, but when he was brought up to heaven before he, didn't want to bow to Adam when Adam was created, he would teach angels, and, he was kind of like a teacher because he was so high rank. And now this is more fringe, but it's mystical Islamic belief. There's this theory, and I truly wholeheartedly believe this. It's not just when you're handed a cup, it's not just the contents of the cup. It's also, who, it's not if you. It's also like what's the condition of the cup, right? So let's say I want to drink pure fresh water, but I'm drinking out of a really dirty cup, right? By the time I drink that water, it's going to become dirty. So it's this belief that the devil at the time when he was up there, he was teaching good belief system. He was teaching these angels good positive things. So the water was clean, but the cup that he was delivering it to was dirty because he himself was dirty, because he had a lot of arrogance. He deep down he had negative traits, and that's why he later became the devil. So he sort of corrupted these angels. And so when God sent him down, it's more fringe, but it's also the belief that at the time those are also fallen angels, not just Hārūt and Mārūt. It was the angels that the devil was teaching also were sent down with him. So that's also something to think about. So, we're seeing some overlap between the book of Enoch, the Quran, and the Bible, and some of the stories within there. So it's pretty interesting, and I'll try to touch base on things like the Alexander Romance, a book of Solomon, which are also referenced in the Quran, and kind of talk about that, and you can learn some interesting facts. So thank you very much, and I appreciate you watching.